There's nothing quite like the feeling of being in love. The mere sight of your lover can bring on an adrenaline rush. And every day is like an adventure. No matter what, through thick and thin, this person will always be there for you. Even when it comes to your eccentricities. Love can make you go blind to situations you would find morally apprehensible. But how far is too far? Where do you draw the line? For Karla, it was all too good to be true. She was engaged to a sophisticated and handsome professional accountant who had a lot of money. But above all, she loved her fiancé, Paul, very much. To her, he was unique and a wild lover in bed. She would do anything to keep his love, keep him for herself, absolutely anything at all, no matter the price. But this relationship was a bit different than what was normally acceptable. Paul made outlandish demands from Karla for years, and she shockingly agreed to them. You see, one thing that was a real thorn in Paul's side was the fact that Karla wasn't a virgin when they first met when she was 17. In his eyes, it was then Karla's responsibility to make it possible for him to take her little sister's virginity without her knowledge or consent. Karla accepted her fiancé's line of thinking and not only agreed to do this, but also videotaped it as well. This was easy for Karla, and she was going to make it happen. But one thing led to another, and this sinister plot became even darker. Welcome to another episode of Crimson Sin with Tamsin Leigh. I am your host, Tamsin Leigh. You can find a link to today's show notes and sources in the description. Stay up to date with the latest, find behind-the-scenes exclusives, and more by visiting buymeacoffee.com/TamsinLeigh. I also created an account on Patreon, and if I'm being honest, I am liking the setup on that site a lot better because I can make my posts more organized. Also, if you haven't checked out the Tamsin Leigh shop, give it a look. There is a lot to find for everyone. You can find all of these links in the description. Also, if you are viewing this on YouTube, I am sorry for making my videos part 1, part 2s, and so on, but I'm having to do that right now because of my video editor. On the free version, I can only make 30-minute videos. So until I can get that situated, I'm only going to be able to do parts, and I am sorry for that. This is the second episode of what I am calling Couples Who Slay as we count down to Valentine's Day. I am going to put a disclaimer in here as well because what I am going to discuss today is horrible, just disgusting and horrible. This case has it all, so if you are squeamish or sensitive to topics like rape, do not listen any further. Today's case brings us to Ontario, Canada, where in the 1990s, the infamous Ken and Barbie Killers took place. Not only was the case very disturbing, but the outcome for Karla brought a lot of media attention to the case. Many were not happy with the outcome, and I could tell you I am one of the people who was not very happy with what happened. If there are some details missing from this episode, feel free to leave what you know in the comments. So, let's dive in to today's crazy tale. Karla Homolka worked in a veterinary clinic which provided her with basic knowledge of sedatives used for animals. The only problem she faced was determining how much of the sedative to use to knock her sister out long enough for her fiancé to have his way with her. There is so much wrong with that sentence. Karla decided that using halothane, an anesthetic animals inhale before surgery, would work best. She did not want to kill her sister. She just wanted to knock Tammy out and give her to Paul for Christmas. She had experience sedating animals before surgery, so this should be okay to use on her sister, right? But she would not have the proper equipment. Karla would have to put the halothane on a cloth and would hold it over Tammy's face. As a loving older sister would, she decided she would make sure Tammy had plenty of air and check her breathing regularly. According to interviews, this plan came to be when Paul started to become attracted to 15-year-old Tammy in July 1990. Karla hatched a plan to help Paul drug her sister as she saw it was an opportunity to minimize risks, take control, and keep it all in the family. On December 23, 1990, Karla and Paul planned the big day for Tammy. Paul had a brand new camcorder that he used to take videos of the Homolka clan, Mr. and Mrs. Homolka, Karla, Tammy, and Lori, as well as the Christmas decorations in their house. Later that evening, Paul gave Tammy drinks, all of which were laced with the sedative. With the help of alcohol, Tammy was out cold on the couch in no time. As soon as everyone in the house was asleep, Karla and Paul started their evil plan. Paul held the camera on Tammy while he raped her, leaving Karla with the task of keeping the rag soaked in the sedative on her face. But soon, Paul ordered Karla to start making sexual advances on her unconscious sister. Then Tammy threw up. She had eaten before the couple had given her the tranquilizer, which caused this reaction. Karla held her sister upside down to try to clear her throat, as they do to animals in the veterinary clinic. But Tammy still choked to death. Paul and Karla's attempts to revive Tammy were unsuccessful. So they did the only thing they could think of. They dressed her, hid the sedatives and the camera, did the laundry, moved Tammy into her basement bedroom, and then called an ambulance. Karla's parents didn't even know there was something wrong until they heard the ambulance pull up to the house. A few hours later, on December 24th, 1990, Tammy was pronounced dead at St. Catherine's General Hospital without regaining consciousness. Paul told authorities how he had failed at his attempts to revive the 15-year-old. Despite Tammy having a chemical burn on her face, her death was ruled an accident. No more questions were asked. No one looked into the matter any further. But still, this event put Paul and Karla in quite a predicament, because he didn't really get what he wanted, and because Paul wasn't happy, Karla needed to make him happy. The only thing logical to her was to find him a replacement. Karla was obsessed with making sure Paul was happy. She was so afraid that she would lose this exciting man who walked into her life. It became very natural for her to either do something to excite him or find another person for him to get excited about if he ever became bored or distracted in their relationship. After the tragic ending of their last attempt with Tammy, Paul berated Karla for causing her death and was very annoyed by the fact that Tammy wasn't there for his sexual pleasure. It was only logical to Karla to find a replacement. Obviously, it had to be someone young and a virgin. Actually, Karla knew just the right person who looked a lot like Tammy. A girl who was only identified as Jane Doe. She would present Jane as a wedding gift to Paul. Karla had met Jane 2 years prior at a pet store and invited the now 15-year-old to her house on June 7, 1991. Jane looked up to Karla as a role model. She was a beautiful woman, so when she was invited to her home, she gratefully accepted. Karla took Jane to dinner, spending hours together talking. and supplying her with sweet alcoholic drinks, laced with the same sedative she used on her sister. Soon Jane passed out into a deep sleep. When Jane was sound asleep, Karla called Paul over, telling him she had a surprise. Once Paul arrived, he was thrilled to see how much Jane resembled Tammy. However, he was a bit worried that Karla used the same sedative on Jane. Karla told him that it was fine. She was in control of the situation this time. The couple then undressed her. Paul videotaped Karla as she made advances on the girl before he took her virginity. With that part out of the way, and he captured all of this on videotape, he moved onto his favorite activity, sodomizing the victim in the most brutal way. When he was done, Karla had to clean the blood off the girl and put her to bed. The next morning, Jane was feeling very sick to her stomach and obviously extremely sore. She also met Paul for what she believed was the first time because she had no idea what happened to her the night before. Paul was very happy, ecstatic even, for the gift Karla gave him. He was pretty amazed by the things she would do for him, but he couldn't help that he was having second thoughts about marrying her. She was getting kind of old for his taste. He liked young women who were virgins, and Karla was already 21 years old. Even though he was having second thoughts about the wedding, he still went through with it. When it came to their wedding, it had to be the biggest, most lavish, most unforgettable wedding that any of their guests ever attended. They pulled out all the stops, from the historic church in Niagara-on-the-Lake with white horses and carriage, champagne, and a sit-down dinner for 150 guests, where the main course was veal stuffed pheasant at Queen's Landing. Every detail about the wedding was under Paul's control. He controlled Karla's $2,000 wedding dress and her hairstyle. The menu was his decision. Even the vows were up to him, with Karla's vow stating love, honor, and obey. Also, he made the minister pronounce them as man and wife, not husband and wife, because obviously, if it was husband and wife, then they would be equal. The wedding wasn't just this grand blowout that was meant to celebrate their love and make memories. Paul actually viewed it as a great business opportunity. He expected his guests to donate money and gifts that were on the same grand scale as their wedding. So all of those in attendance, their gifts and money had to be on par with how much he was spending on the wedding, which is astronomical. But Paul wasn't always this domineering, repugnant character. He was actually quite different in his youth. Paul Bernardo was born into a peculiar family. Marilyn, his mother, was adopted in childhood by the wealthy Toronto lawyer Gerald Eastman and his wife Elizabeth. Marilyn was raised in a respectable household. She would go on to marry Kenneth Bernardo, who was the son of an Italian immigrant. His father operated a successful marble and tile business. However, he was abusive toward his wife and children. Kenneth decided to become an accountant instead of following in his father's footsteps. Marilyn would marry Kenneth Bernardo in 1960. She originally intended to marry another man, but her father did not approve of him because he did not have the education Gerald Eastman demanded in a son-in-law. Kenneth and Marilyn would settle down in a middle-class neighborhood in Scarborough, Toronto. Married life did not go well for Paul's parents, as Kenneth allegedly abused his wife. After having 2 children with Kenneth, Marilyn found herself back in the arms of the man her father disapproved of. This is how Paul Bernardo was conceived. Kenneth did not appear too bothered by this and actually had his name listed on the baby's birth certificate. Probably one of the reasons Kenneth was seemingly open-minded about his wife's infidelity was due to him going through his own problems as well. He had fondled a young girl and went to court for it. He was also a peeping Tom, going around the neighborhood at night to look at young women through their windows. Worse yet, he started sexually abusing his own daughter in front of other family members, and would eventually be charged with crimes involving voyeurism and pedophilia. As time went on, Marilyn became severely depressed. She stopped taking care of the home and her children, withdrawing into herself and eventually hiding out in the basement. The children definitely felt the effects of their mother's mental and emotional turmoil. Paul seemed to have escaped the unpleasant experiences that his older siblings endured. Despite coming from a dysfunctional family, he presented himself as a well-adjusted child. Those who knew him at this young age described him as a happy child who was always smiling. He was well-mannered, did well in school, and was very sweet. Paul was also an avid member of the Boy Scouts. As he grew older, he became more involved in scouting and would work as a counselor during the summers. He was one of the most popular counselors with children as they loved him and appeared to enjoy being with him. Teenage girls also seemed to adore him with his angelic looks and his shy demeanor. Paul was intelligent, worked hard to keep good grades in school, and held numerous after-school jobs. He was determined to make something of himself. Many pegged him to have a great future as a businessman, but no one really knew what was actually beneath that charming exterior. He soon started to develop pyromaniac inclinations and often had dark sexual fantasies. One of the most notable is that he would create a virgin farm where he would breed virgin girls to rape. In 1981, when Paul was 16, he got into an argument with his mother. Marilyn then told him that Kenneth was not his real father, and he was the result of an extramarital affair. This had a negative effect on Paul. After this, he would call his mother a slut and a whore. His mother would retort back, calling him a bastard from hell. Due to his mother's infidelity and his father's sexual perversions, Paul began hating his parents. His attitude toward women dramatically changed as well. One of his first girlfriends left him for one of his friends. To get back at her, he set fire to all of her belongings that he had access to. Paul attended Sir Wilfrid Laurier Collegiate Institute. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, but I know it's most likely French. I'm usually pretty good at figuring out French things since I'm from Louisiana, but I'm pretty sure I messed that pronunciation up. So he went there before attending the University of Toronto Scarborough in 1982. In the early 1980s, he and a friend were recruited into Amway, which is a multi-level marketing company that sells health, beauty, and home care products. Which I found this part interesting because on one of my other episodes for Nexium, Keith Raniere actually was a part of Amway, I believe. The sales culture here deeply affected Paul and was influenced by the new things he learned from the people who recruited him. He and his college friends would practice pickup techniques on women in bars, which proved to be very effective. His sexual fantasies developed even darker by the time he started attending the University of Toronto. Paul would also find enjoyment in humiliating his dates in public. He also preferred forceful anal sex with his partners. His relationships would become violent and unstable as he would threaten to kill his partners if they told anyone of the abuse. By 1986, Paul was served 2 restraining orders by 2 women after he made obscene phone calls. Due to his appetite for toys, clothes, and money, Paul needed another job to support himself. While still in college, Paul and one of his friends began smuggling cigarettes across the US-Canada border. But this wasn't enough. He began searching for the ultimate scam in which he would make mass amounts of money. After graduating from college, Paul got a job as a junior accountant at Price Waterhouse. All of his girlfriends who were tired of being tied up and beaten had left him. But it wasn't long until he met the girl of his dreams, Karla Homolka. Please continue to part 2.